But today, I am really, really excited to have Erik Ayers with us. He's got a really cool company, good seeker, and him and I had an awesome debrief a couple weeks ago in preparation for this, and we were just kind of going back and forth. So look to continue that conversation today with you, Erik. And I think we settled on the theme, and I think the epiphany kind of for both of us, I felt like we were like, well, how do we automate the hiring process while keeping the candidate experience quality as world-class as possible? And I think that's sort of where our two worlds collide, right? Like, I'm a talent assessment guy, and naturally talent assessments don't always make the candidate experience great, but they're necessary, right? We have to evaluate people in the hiring process. We have to make good hiring decisions for their sake and for the business's sake. But you're in the business of making that candidate experience like world-class, and you do a bunch of cool stuff. How did you end up being this recruitment marketer, storyteller, employee experience guru?
Definitely would not go as far as guru.
I thought you had some pretty slick ideas.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I just want to appreciate anybody showing up for this thing. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I fell into it, man. I'm a marketer by trade. Actually, I'm probably a public policy guy. That's what I studied in school and learned. I think at the time it was lots of different stakeholders, and how do you manage your expectations when you maybe have a particular platform issue, and then I learned that sales at the end of the day, right? And then I got into marketing, professional services marketing specifically, where you're really marketing people's talents and their capabilities, not really a product.
Yeah.
And at one point, I had a CEO who said, "Hey, why don't you see what you can do with recruiting? Let's try some different stuff." And I said, I'll give it a shot.
Why not?
Fortunately, I had really good team and HR and some recruiters who've been at it for a long time, taught me a lot. But I think my kind of marketing world met recruiting head on at about the time when Glassdoor was really starting to blow up and people were starting to take it seriously. And I said, what if we could just what if we could bottle up all the behind the scenes stories that are floating around this office like bubbles and popping every day, and we're missing them? What if we could capture them and then use them for a couple of reasons? One, share them with candidates, and maybe make our employees feel better at the same time. So I really stumbled
internally and externally.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, your heart and soul, your brand, or your people. So it has to start internal. I mean, there's no way to fake that. So yeah, I kind of fell into it definitely come at things from a markeam standpoint. I'm the first to admit how little I know and how much I learn every day.
Well, I think that's interesting because, I am 100% convinced that hiring is a sales and marketing activity first. So recruitment marketing, fill your funnel, you've got to be a great marketer. And you got to be a great salesperson as a recruiter once you engage talent. And then that opens the door to evaluation. And that was my journey, right? I'm a talent assessment guy. I'm everybody's worst nightmare. Nobody wants to do this. Candidates don't want to go through the process. I get it. I want a job. I need a job. I want to apply for the job. Give me the job, right? But, we're not doing anybody a service if we put somebody in the wrong job. Just because you want it doesn't mean it's right for you personally. The damage that it can have to take the wrong job on your career is greater than getting a paycheck today, right? Patience is helpful in some cases, and many cases, in that journey. And it is a much more complicated subject than I'm making it too, by the way. So please don't everybody crucify me for oversimplifying this, but yeah, so I started having clients who would come to me and they would bring me 3 candidates, and we'd help them evaluate those candidates, and we'd say, don't hire any of these people. And that's heart crushing. It's soul crushing, right? What do I do now? Right? Start over. Well, geez, it took me 2 months just to get these 3 people to this point, right? And that was like 9 years ago, 10 years ago, I started to realize this. I'm like, oh man, I gotta be a lot better at recruitment market. We gotta help people fill their funnels. And that's still not my expertise. So that's why I love talking to guys like you, right? Like, you realized that a long time ago, and you've kind of made a practice out of it. What I loved about this is, so you have kind of a really unique way of doing this, right? You mentioned like capture the bubbles when they happen. Help us understand, like, what do you mean by that? Like, how do you do that? It's not just like creating a video this one time, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, you mean like what is our solution?
Well, sure, yeah. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
people could do it themselves, or they could use your tool, but I mean,
yeah, yeah,
there's an idea here, right?
yeah, yeah. No, for sure. I think first of all, you got to give the tool to the people whose stories who fundamentally are the story, right? So it's about pushing it to the edge, push the creation of the content to the people who experience it. And that's what our product does, is it kind of gives them a way to easily share, create, and ultimately share internally all kinds of controls for the company. And we don't have to get into that, but like the content's stuck here, right? The content's stuck in person's head. They're involved in something with the team. They feel pretty good about it. I'm not quite sure if anybody else notices. If you've got a culture who actually does want to hear the voice of employees, I mean, they're the first mile, like an old telecom sense. They're the ones who have the content stuck here. So you got to give them the tool. So that's what we do, is you give them a kind of simple story generator. They respond to story prompts, and we can talk about it later, like there's strategy to it, right? You want to give people clues of the types of content you need, but it's all about their story first.
Yeah.
So our tool,
how do you keep it in front of them, right? Like, so I don't know, a truck driver, right? Like, how do you keep the story? They probably have wonderful stories, right? They customer has a problem, they show up, they help solve that customer's problem, or they deliver good service, and the customer's like super stoked, like, George, you did an amazing job, you saved my ass today, or something, right? Like, that's the story you want to catch, right? But
right.
how do you catch it in the moment? So
I mean, our product, that's actually a really good point. A lot of times people don't realize they're in the moment.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we've learned is the person who's in the moment sometimes isn't the one who realizes it. It's the person around them.
Yeah.
It's the manager, it's the teammate. It's kind of this paradox of, like, you can't see yourself in your own movie. You actually do need somebody else to see that thing mattered.
Yeah.
And then you have to give people culturally the empower them to kind of speak up and share. But it is one of the challenges with capturing employee stories, is that the story that the person who's at the center of the story often doesn't realize it. And that's our product doesn't solve that problem. Like, it's just a human nature problem, but it does solve the problem of making it easy for whoever does feel or see the story to quickly tap words, build a story, capture video, all that kind of stuff. And then it's you mentioned something about how to keep it in front of them. That's, as a storytelling strategy, like, you got to share these stories often and frequently in front of people. Whether it's pushing it in your internet or, all hands meetings. If you have the content, it's a lot easier to think about all the ways you can use it, honestly. And every company is different.
Yeah. So it's sort of this thing that builds momentum then, right? Maybe getting started might be a tad bit challenging, but it's like, if you get the momentum going, you capture a couple of stories, you share those with everybody in the team internally, you share them externally on your social, and start incorporating them into your recruitment marketing, and people start seeing this, then somebody else says, hey, well, that's pretty good. And then the next time an opportunity comes, that maybe they're a little more conscientious of the opportunity, right? And then do it again and do it again. And then all of a sudden it becomes a habit.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about getting things going, and I think I wrote a blog article on this at one point, like how to kickstart storytelling, and some of it's pretty simple, and forget our product. I mean, 'cause so much of this you can do without software. It's hard to scale, but
Pull your iPhone.
I kind of tell it when if I'm talking to a customer, I'm like, all right, you want to get started? Go find the leader who everybody least expect to notice anything going on inside the organization. Get them to share the smallest example of any value that you say you stand for as an organization as a story. And you just broke the ice for everybody who's reluctant or fearful, or because the human nature is, I don't know if my story is worth sharing. I mean, we feel that way.
Yeah.
But if you get the person who people least expect to break the ice, it really kind of loosens things up a lot. And that's a good way to get started. I think it's a good way to get started with any sort of employee adoption initiative. It's find the most unwilling person and get them to be the kind of the tip of the spear.
Yeah. I mean, this is what, I started dabbling in this before I met you, and we were kind of using like one-way video interviews to do these and create them. And that was the biggest problem I found was adoption. It's like, even if you made it so easy for them, they still just had to do it. And it's a 3-minute, 2-minute task, click button, hit record. But I find people are fearful, I don't know, my hair is messy today, or my makeup's not right, or I don't, they're camera shy, but I don't even know if it's that, right? It's just more this kind of there's just this fear. But that's where you guys come in. You do a really great job of helping people tell the story. And so this is something I think everybody can, a takeaway people can use tomorrow probably is, maybe how do you help extract stories out of people? What kinds of questions can you ask them to get them started, right? Because that's also the other part is if I said, hey, Erik, record a video about why you like working here. That's just too broad. I mean, where do I begin?
Well, it's a really good point you're making. I would say I would never answer that question.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the only person that you company asking me that question, the only person that helps is you. That doesn't help me.
Yeah.
So if there's not something in it for the contributor, why do it? And companies are missing the point. They're asking employees to say how awesome the company is instead of asking the employee to share stories about the impact that they are making. They in the middle.
Yeah.
It's not about I did a blog post too about testimonials versus employee spotlights versus stories. Fundamentally, 3 different things. And only one of those typically puts the employee's work and the impact of their work at the center of it. Spotlights are nice. I like them. Testimonials are almost always about how awesome the company is. It's coercion. And that is not the way to inspire storytellers. The way to inspire storytellers is to make it has to be something in it for them. Now, the challenge there is everybody's different. One person may say, well, God, and I've had this happen, say, this is an opportunity for me to demonstrate that I have hidden talents so that I can be utilized across the organization because I'm a remote employee and nobody knows I have mad research skills.
Yeah.
So internal visibility for a young professional who's trying to go is important, and some of them crave it. That's a motivator.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of those things, but fundamentally, you got to put them in the middle of the story. Otherwise, you will get some people, but most people will be reluctant because it's really just helping the company.
Yeah.
And if you're doing those things,
the aha moment right here. This is the key that you're talking about, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that gets to the fundamental challenge. This Good Seeker has always had kind of at its core just bettering people at work. I did a research study a long time ago about the number of people who wished the small things were recognized that they did and made an impact more often. It was 98% of people wished those things were noticed more. And then I asked leaders and CEOs, and they said the exact same thing about their own work.
Yeah.
What does that tell you? It tells you that we're not communicating enough about individual contributors' impact, and not everybody's a hero.
Yeah.
Talking about the small stuff that happens every day. If you can kind of unlock that vibe, then obviously you're a kick butt company. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the little things that make the kind of the world go round, make the business operate, that make it a great environment or a fun place or a good thing. Now the big things will happen, but they don't happen necessarily every day, right? You don't get a over the moon client every day, but maybe unless you're a restaurant server, I don't know.
Right.
But then maybe you have lots of stories to tell every day. You can talk about your favorite client interaction every day, Um,
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of research on task relevance, right? And that's like, I want to know that my task, hence the word task, not massive accomplishment, my task mattered and was relevant to somebody else achieving something as well. Like if you can make people feel like their tasks matter, like, I mean, check the box on engagement, communication, living your values, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, this deep thinking here. I like you going down this path, but I mean, if you're talking about adoption and how to get people to kind of share stories, that's kind of what we're talking about here. Then you got to put them at the center of it.
yeah. So what kinds of questions you mentioned, like, hey, there's different motivators for different people, right? So how do you deal with that challenge, right? To maybe uncover them. I mean, is it a little bit of trial and error? You ask me a certain question today, maybe I don't answer it because I'm not that interested in that, or telling that story, and then tomorrow you ask me a different one, I go, oh, I want to talk about that, right? Or how do you get me to open up, I suppose?
Yeah, great question. So number one, got kind of putting my company hat on. You have to have a reason to capture content. It is very important. I say, like, you got to align it with strategy. I don't know, what you're trying to debunk some myth on Glassdoor. You got to hire, big hiring initiative coming up. Companies trying to merge. Like, you have to have a reason to need the content.
Well, I think, and I think culture building might be a big part of that, right? Because I mean, I feel like we all deal with this in business. Like, here's a culture we desire, and here's what it is. And how do you like transform culture or get them to be merged together to be more of what we hope it is? But that is such a difficult task. But this might be the solution to that, right?
Hey, look, change happens over time, just like trust is built over time, over a series of events, typically small, that happen in patterns.
Yeah.
So I can't just tell you to change, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about cultural transformation or merging two cultures. Like, you got to literally find and play back examples of the behaviors that you want over a period of time. And the storytelling is a great, however you do it. It just can't be like a one-off thing. It needs to be a little bit of like drip, you got to drip over time, consistency.
Yeah. Well, that's what we talked in the beginning. If you can get the momentum going, then hopefully naturally that'll create a momentum and a consistency, and then aligning that with the strategy. And I guess the reason why it popped into culture as I think about core values, to me, core values are the definition of the culture we desire in our business, right? A representation of that. And then obviously our mission and our vision, but then everybody plays a role in executing the mission and the vision, hopefully demonstrating the culture and the core values of the business. And so, everybody has their own little mini mission within the business, right?
Yeah.
To support the bigger one is kind of, I guess, how I visualize this. And so I'm starting to think about your idea here, right? I'm like, okay, so, the mission, if you're accomplishing, if as an individual, if I'm accomplishing my mission, I get to spotlight my success there, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
And now I get to talk about me in that case. Am I following this correctly?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not good at this.
I mean, you asked a question a while ago, like, how do you get somebody to respond? Like, what kinds of questions do you ask, and when? And a lot of it is in the art of what questions. But like, if I were to ask you, two things have to come together. You have to think about who you ask and what you ask.
Yeah.
And under the umbrella of, I'm asking these questions to generate content that helps move the mission forward, to align whatever the goals are, right? So who you ask, Maybe I'll share that link. I mean, we got 25, how to find 20 storytellers in your organization that you don't even know exist. Think about this, like the person who just finished a training course,
Wow.
who has had 2 to 3 weeks to apply it, saw it work, and is glad they took the course.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now their story
first, but then they did it. And then,
yeah, right. But they so now like that's somebody who has a story to share. Why? Because they probably feel pretty good about the course. They made an impact. But you can ask the question in a way where it is, how did what you learn in X make a difference in your role over the past month?
yeah.
Now I'm a teacher. Now me sharing that story is not, I'm not tooting, it's not about me pounding my chest. Nobody likes that. But people do like to teach. And if I can share a story that helps others realize that this training might be a good thing to take, or it's kind of like a little bit of a humble brag.
Yeah.
But if you ask the question, you can put the employee at the center of it. The company gets the type of content that they need that's strategic, and it feels right. It doesn't feel forced.
Yeah, it's very natural. Yeah.
Yeah. But who you ask and what questions you ask, and we help companies set all that stuff up. But it's
well, if you find that link, put it in there.
yeah.
Let's think about, we talked about this a bit. Maybe, briefly, I mean, I don't know. I think this is an obvious question, but like, how does storytelling help you improve your recruitment marketing efforts, right? I mean, we're sitting here talking about it. Like, I obviously think it's important, but like, tell me why, or tell me, I think you had some cool stories about how you've implemented this and like what it did.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's the topic, right? It's candidate experience. I mean, so number one, I tell people, like, imagine if you have the content.
Yeah.
How you have to have it to be able to use it. So, yeah, I mean, we've got one customer, so it's 100 employees generate 800 employee stories. I mean, 800.
Yeah, they got content for days.
No, and you might ask, like, why and how would I need that so much? Going back to my point about, in order to prove it and build trust with people that you walk the talk on those things in your EVP or your values or whatever it is, you do need a lot of small examples. But they love it for onboarding, right? So I can now pre-board people and introduce them to our culture and their team, so that when they hit the ground, like day one, they already kind of know how to practice those behaviors that were words on your wall or whatever, right? Because it's real examples. But from a recruit, how that helps the candidate, I mean, it's obviously post-hiring, but you'll find that when people feel more connected faster to the organization, they start making employee referrals sooner.
Well, that's to be part of the hiring process. I mean, I teach a driven hiring system, and the T is training and onboarding. And I always say the first part, the foundation, and the last part, the T, the training and onboarding part, those are the two places where we make the biggest mistakes, because they're the hardest tasks or things to execute, because they're kind of squishy, they're hard to construct. But you just gave a great example, right? If I take this content and I incorporate it into that onboarding process, that it does more than just the words on the wall about here's our core values, but it helps people see real examples and get them someone. And also, like you said, to get some acclimated with the people. Like, oh, I now know Jane in accounting, which you might not have met Jane in accounting for 3 months.
That's a great point. I mean,
shown that story, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. That was actually an unexpected application for the platform.
Yeah.
And that just shows you my marketing mindset, not or my limitations of background. But yeah, I mean, showing people how to make an impact fast. I mean, if you're in a business, for example, in consulting, where your people bill, you probably sold that your people are collaborative. Well, make sure they know how to act and be and perform collaborative in your culture, and do that fast. And then they're doing it sooner. They're probably giving your customers a better experience and having more fun doing it. So I think the onboarding is a really neat. We have another company called Morley Companies. They're awesome. They're about 4,000 employees. And I love what they're doing. They're actually embedding storytelling as a cultural norm inside their organization. So not only and there are lots of other benefits of using the content to attract the right people who are like most likely to be a good fit on we can talk about that in a second, but like once that person comes on board, they want to make sure that this is a safe place to share stories about the impact of your work. So they're building it literally into their onboarding. Like, here's where you go to share a story. If you ever have this experience or this experience, go here. So from day one, people feel compelled to have a voice. And I mean, that's bigger than Good Seeker. I mean, our product's being used for that, but it's just a really cool, really powerful example of how storytelling can become such a big part of your company.
No, it's amazing. Yeah, no, that's, I mean, it's a best practice. And then by adding this video and this enablement tool on top of that to really allow it to just happen at such scale, 800 stories for a 100-person company or whatever. I mean, like, that's just remarkable. And I was just thinking about, as you're talking about, I was like, man, well, you just use that in all your sales and marketing activity too, right? Like, boom, there's your marketing collateral to point to your customers or to arm your salespeople with or whatever, right?
I mean, yeah. So again, my background, sales and marketing. So that was always, yeah. I mean, it opens doors. I mean, talk about differentiating by reaching out to people who you're trying to build new relationships with. Like, selling our services are awesome. That's great. But at the end of the day, people do it. And here's a page of 8 stories, 10 stories, 20 stories I created just for you that highlight how our team rolls when we say collaboration and perseverance. And like, would you like to meet us? It's definitely for some organizations, it can be used.
Yeah. Well, if you have that many stories, I mean, I'm sure you have a story about how collaboration came through to like solve the client's problem and how that became a big win and everybody got satisfaction that they achieved the mission of the company for the client and solve the client's problem. I mean, some people are going to find that fun to share. I mean, I would. I mean, every time you get big win, like find that fun. Like I like to talk about this recent win. It's a concrete company. They have about 75 employees, and they got 10 applicants in January, and 10 applicants in February, and 20 applicants in March, 300 in April, and 5 hires in under 3 weeks. In a market hiring commercial drivers.
So hard.
Drive concrete truck. Everybody knows that's an impossible task, but it's not if you just rethink how you go about it. And that was kind of like, what I saw this is the initial, like what I saw about this storytelling idea that you've got this, is like, so how do you use that to go to create those impacts? But to me, like, I get excited about, because this is what I get excited about. Like it's like a puzzle for me. It's like solving the Rubik's Cube. I mean, I don't know. It's just interesting to me. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you do start to realize, somebody else came up with the word, but we're using it. Like, it's like, oh, you're building a story bank. Like, if you had a bank and had a bunch of stories in it, and you could I used to call it a library, but like if it's all in one place, you can use it for all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And you really start to think about it more as a strategic part of your business. And more importantly, like an asset. Like that story has value. You better put it into a place and protect it. And then when it builds up over time, it's more valuable. It's more proof. It's more evidence that you can use to grow your team and potentially customers. So it's exciting.
So give us some examples of how you've used this to, not only fill the funnel talent, but help screen. You were telling me one the other day, maybe you have a different one, maybe the same one, but how you use it to screen people in or out of your hiring process.
Yeah. I mean, full disclosure, I mean, we're exploring that now. Like, yeah, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I have a bunch of evidence but how it's being used right now for that is, you go get the stories that really represent your organization. We've talked about that enough, right? And then now I have the story bank. Now I I used to be in the accounting world, so I always use this as example of like, let's say you're the accounting firm that wants creative accountants. They usually don't go together,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
well, go find examples, right? Go find examples, and then you share those stories. And basically, what you're saying is, if you can relate to this and you like what you see, then explore opportunities with us. We let you put open, like, embed jobs in the stories too. But the point is, story first, job second. If you like the story and you can relate, it's a little bit of a pre-filter, because
yeah,
a non-creative accountant is not going to say that's a place for me.
yeah.
So if
You know,
you
like
have
I
the content,
when they ask me to be creative.
right, you're like, I shake, right? And then you have the ones which are like, I don't know why I got in accounting in the first place, and now I'm like, should
Yeah,
have been a marketing guy,
yeah,
or gal. And yeah, so if you have the content, you can use it to attract people who really see their own success in the stories that you share. So
yeah,
imagine you're learning about a passive candidate and you're on LinkedIn and you're like, gosh, they value this, this, and this. You're really doing your homework, focusing on a really good quality experience that you want to have with this person. So go into the story bank and tap some words and generate a page of 10 stories that you believe will resonate with that person based on what you see. Right. And then you share that with them and you say, hey, I looked at your LinkedIn profile, I'm not a bot. And, I genuinely think that we could be a fit for you. Check out these stories from our team
yeah.
that I believe align with the things that you find important. If you like what you see, let's talk.
Yeah.
So you can literally use it as a prospecting tool for an audience of one, or, more broadly promote it so
Yeah,
that the right people find you and the wrong people may not like your story.
yeah. No, that's it, right? And I mean, I I worked with this guy, Jerry Ivy, and old guy, super cool guy, like he was really old. And he was so old school. And that was like the first lesson I learned from him from a sales perspective, is like, tell stories to your clients, right? Like they're either going to resonate with that story or they're not. And the ones that resonate, though, they're going to instantly be entranced or engaged in what the next part of this conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the aha moment for me, when we first talked, Eric, was, okay, you got this really cool mechanism for creating and manufacturing the story bank, right? And then to then deliver it and extract it, and to then be able to sort of use it in all these different ways you can imagine, in any way you can imagine, which is super cool. Like we gotta have this, right? And then from there, then that should allow us to do something like go from 20 applicants to 300 applicants. And because there's a problem with both of those situations. You only have 20 applicants, the chances that, 5 of those people are hireable is not good. Maybe one, right? But if you get to 300 applicants, finding 5 hireable, good fit, strong fit, high quality, really good, high potential culture match, all these
Yeah.
things, much, much more likely. But the 21 is not enough, and 300 is too many. And even if somewhere in between, I mean, I'd rather have too many than not enough.
Yeah.
It's kind of always been my thinking. But every hiring manager and HR person complains about having too many, and they complain about having too few. They never say it's just the right amount. So, but again, if you have this engaging storytelling, you could use that to nurture the relationship with the candidate through the process at scale, right? Because as a recruiter, I can't interact personally with 300 people.
Right. Yeah.
Even if I whittle that down to 100 people, which is probably what realistically happens, you knock out 200 of them right off the bat, probably. And now you got 100 true sales qualified prospects or marketing qualified prospects at this point, or candidate marketing qualified candidates, I guess.
Yeah.
Then you can begin to ask them to complete some evaluation tasks. And I mean, that's ultimately what we did with this, concrete company. We had so many applicants, we just asked them to complete integrity tests. Integrity was a core value of the client. We had these candidates complete integrity tests, and then that whittled the field down further. And then we just automated the scheduling of interviews. So everybody who completed the integrity test, who was qualified on paper, and then we just simply sent them a scheduling link and with the address, and we said, hey, Erik, schedule a 30-minute interview, and you self-booked, and we gave you the address, say, okay, show up at this address at the time you chose. And they basically had a full day of interviews on a Monday, and they hired five people, and it was done. Like the job was done, what was previously an impossible task. So that's kind of how I see. Now, I mean, we didn't use storytelling in that process as well. Like we did it all in writing, like in text and things, which is fine. We got to have that too. But I could now with AI, I could pull these stories, I could turn them into little snippets or little comments or written form, but then I could also use those snippets, the video, so I could have the video, the snippet, and the task for them to complete. And I think we might have just automated the hiring process.
Well, you'll like, so I can get more of these. I love them. They're awesome. I mentioned that. So I learned so much from talking to these customers, finding new ways to do stuff. So like they were capturing stories from, first of all, I'm not sure who's on the live stream, but if there are any recruiters out there, like you are unsung storytellers and story seekers.
Yeah.
Because you hear people's stories, you hear hiring manager stories about how awesome something is, you hear candidate stories about how they're a good fit, and it's like your job is to kind of, if you can match those, I would say like I find that the really, really powerful recruiters that I meet are literally getting a story from a hiring manager, 3 stories that highlight a job role. They have them, and then they almost are like matching stories between.
Cupid.
It's really cool. I love that they're in that role. But I was going to say, recruiters, they know the hiring process story. So what Morley will do is capture stories about the candidate experience through the hiring process. Yeah. Because they were doing some assessments and stuff too. And they were actually finding that some people maybe look good and they would drop off when they were asked to do the assessment. It's because they weren't clear what was going to happen during the assessment process, and how important it was not only to the organization, but how important it was to the candidate to go through the assessment process. Because if they did and they were a fit, they were almost more guaranteed to be a fit, and it was going to be a better experience. They were making a better decision, but they had to tell the story of the process of going through it. So they capture stories about the hiring experience from their team, and they share that with candidates, and they're finding that they're getting higher quality people to go through faster. I thought you made me think of that when you were talking about
that was a story you were telling me the other day, and I thought was really, really cool. Yeah. And again, I think there's a misunderstanding from the candidate perspective, but it's because we often do a poor job of explaining the why behind the hiring process. There are 2 things. One, we don't explain the hiring process, so it's a mystery, it's a black box. It's like, okay, candidate, they enter the hiring process, and then you're asked to complete a task or a step or schedule an interview or complete an assessment or provide references or do a one-way video interview or like whatever the task is, right? And then you go, as a candidate, you're like, okay, well, do I want to invest my time? What's next? And that question, what's next, seldom answered. Right? So, okay, if a candidate thinks to himself, okay, if I complete this task, what's next? Well, that's an unknown. I mean, hopefully it leads to the next step. They can at least deductively reason that it's going to happen, right? But what the next step is a bit of a mystery. So again, demystifying, using your strategy here to kind of tell that story, to tell the candidate experience story, so that it is not a mystery. So I know that, hey, if I do this step, they're really good about getting people back to people within 24 to 72 hours and letting them know that they're either been invited to the next step, which is say an in-person interview or something, or whatever that is. And then, are they really good about actually letting people know that we've decided not to move forward? And so at least I know I will get an answer quickly. Right. I mean, a lot of times, like, that's the thing about ghosting, right? like the thing maddening about ghosting on both sides, whether candidate's ghosting the employer or your employer's ghosting the candidate or the girl's ghosting the boy or whatever it is. I love the dating analogies here, but ghosting happens all throughout life, and the prospect, the salesperson, and the prospect, and vice versa. It's always happening because the other person doesn't want to give the other person bad news.
Right. Yeah.
But we want the bad news because we can't live without knowing definitively what the answer to the question is, right?
Yeah. It's frustrating. It's honestly, it's a mental, it's stressful.
Yeah. So again, if we make a commitment to promise, hey, this is our process, we're going to stick to this process, and we commit to providing at least some level of feedback, like you're in or you're out, it gives people peace of mind that, okay, if I complete this task, they've promised to me to give me an answer one way or the other. And if it's a yes, then I know what my next steps are going to be and what that time frame is. And if it's a no, well, no, and I won't have to have sleepless nights wondering if I got that job at SpaceX or something.
Yeah. I mean, you just made me think about just overall any process, right? There's always reluctance to do anything new. Maybe for the change management folks out there or experts, it's how can you use stories to tell the story of the process, why it exists, why it matters, what the benefits are, what happens, take away the mystery. You're likely to get more people enter the process, the right people to do it and the wrong people to not. Like that.
Yeah. That's the wrong people, especially those are the shotgun resume appliers, right? They're not that serious. They're just cluttering our inbox full of nonsense or whatever, right? Yeah,
right.
Easy, low-hanging fruit, wrong person to get out of our funnel, right?
Yeah, and you'd hate by not explaining the process to actually have the right person think they're wrong and go away too, right? I mean, I think everybody wins when you're more clear about what to expect. And if it's a good experience for people, I mean, why not? Why not tell that story? I mean, most people assume it's bad, and it doesn't have to be bad.
Yeah. Well, it's like this is a great story. So I go to the DMV, and that's just guaranteed to be a nightmare, right? And it's a necessary evil. So kind of like interviewing for a job. You don't just apply and get the job, right? You don't just renew your driver's license. And we had to get these real IDs in California because we're super liberal and we don't have real ID, but they don't our regular driver's license doesn't qualify as good enough, right? So necessary evil. I got to go get this real ID. I've been putting off for 2 years. Thank God COVID happened. I had to I could punt this thing till I could renew my license and get my real ID. I'm just dreading this. I'm like, man, I got to go to the DMV. I'm going to spend however much time. It's a necessary evil. They're not just going to give it to me. Right? They're not just going to mail it to me. There's no easy way to do this. I got to go through the hoops. And, I just dreaded it. But then I did the online thing and I submitted all my documents and I followed the thing and it wasn't that bad. And they gave me an appointment and I showed up and there were 4 people in line on a Friday afternoon at 3:00. And I was in the appointment line. I was okay, this is doable. I go to the thing and the lady at first is we don't do this on Friday. So I'm like, oh my God, let me talk. Showed her all my appointments, all my documents. She's like, oh, wait, okay, well, done. They call your number. As soon as I'm done with the first lady who checks me in, they call my number. I'm at the thing dealing with the person to finish the job. And I was out of the DMV in 15 minutes, guys. I was just blown away.
Awesome.
If somebody would have told me that story prior, I would have done this 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah, true. It's a great point. Yeah.
Okay, look, this has been awesome. Man, you've given me a bazillion ideas. We could talk all day about them. I look forward to finding ways to collaborate with you here in the future. Before we sign off, we do 2 tasks. One, just give me 1 or 2 things you could do tomorrow to become better at storytelling within your organization. Or recruitment marketing. I mean, just give us 2 quick hitting things that, kind of easy to implement, pretty quickly.
Just 2
or 1.
No, I'm kidding.
5.
Look, I think we touched on one earlier and you kind of shed a light on me on maybe how important it is sometimes you think you're doing it and you're not.
Yeah.
Meaning I would look at, like, if you think you are storytelling, and I almost wish we had a different word for that, but I think if you're looking to tap the voice of your employee experiences to make sure that the good stuff bubbles up, look at what you're doing now and make sure you're doing it. If you're all about, I gotta tell you a funny story. If you're all about trying to get positive reviews, right, and you're doing something to ask people for reviews, be careful. I've had interns that scan Glassdoor profiles. They don't even read anything.
Yeah.
They just look at the dates and they call BS based on the date and how many words are in the quote, because it'll be 5 words, 5 words. So whatever, like, that's not storytelling. Like, getting your employees to go on Glassdoor and share good reviews is not what we're talking about here. Your testimonials. Who's at the center of the testimonial? Is the company at the center of the testimonial, or is it about the person at the center of the testimonial? So like, ask yourself, are you really focused on the impact of employees at the center of your story? I would say that's number one if you're doing something. And if you're not doing something, I would tell people to start. It's an amazing tool. Like, it really, you can start small. I mean, you don't have okay. So one of the big fears people have with this is like, I can't roll this out to everybody. Like, the people won't do it, and you're right. Not everybody will, but I guarantee you could find that pool of people who would be thrilled that you asked to put their story at the center of your brand. Find those people and just start small. I mean, it can be really immediately impactful.
Yeah. Just get started. Start small. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right?
Yeah.
Love it. I love it. This is fantastic. Erik, how do we get in touch with you?
I think they put the LinkedIn profile. I mean, goodseeker.com, actually goodseeker.com/meet-Erik with a K is a little page I created, which is like some of my lessons learned in building Goodseeker.
Nice.
Got
some stories on there.
It kind of does. And the people I thank for helping build the organization, who's people like you. I got to add you to my wall of thanks, by the way. They're LinkedIn. LinkedIn, goodseeker.com/meet-Erik. Those two are great.
Awesome. Hey, Erik, these last 2 conversations we've had have been really inspiring for me. So thank you for taking so much time out of your day. I look forward to future collaborations. We'll sign off now, but we'll follow up with you and we'll ping you as we start to distribute the content, and everybody who signed up and who was here, you can share this with your friends, or you can, forward the emails, or, so again, we'll redistribute this in so many different ways that you can share this with others. But I am so in love with this idea and what you're doing here.
Thank you. That gives me inspiration. Thanks.
Thanks, Erik. Have a good one.
Thanks. All right.